Hello friends, my name's Ty and I'm going to read to you. Today's selection is a story that I'm especially fond of because when I first started writing short stories and submitting them to contests, this is the first one that ever got shortlisted. It didn't win, but it made me feel pretty good to at least make the shortlist. And it's called Reluctant Valor. Here we go. My day was going exceptionally well until I heard the scream. The dice had been good to me and my purse jingled cheerfully. All was well and Lady Luck was at my side, walking with me hand in hand. I was making my way back to my rented rooms, my mind bent towards a flagon of wine, when I first heard her cry for help. The cry was immediately followed by heavy, thumping footfalls and jingling armor that could only belong to the town guard, a generally ineffective bunch of fools but busy enough to cause a nuisance to men in my line of work. As I was looking around, the source of the cry came stumbling into view. She was dressed in long blue robes, which might have been once fine, but were dirty and tattered. She was trying to run, but she was exhausted and was really more like a shamble. It did not help she was trying to manage a large leather satchel that she had clutched to her chest. I didn't really have anything important to do and decided to watch the show, leaning on a convenient wall, my hand resting on the basket hilt of my sword. An episode of the town guard's foolery was better than a circus of clowns and dancing bears, and the girl was running right towards me, guaranteeing a prime viewing. As she got closer, her long black hair flying in her face, I pulled my pipe from my breast pocket of my vest and stuck it in my teeth. I grinned to see the quickest, meaning least fat, of the town guard come around the corner behind her. The man was red-faced and infuriated, and the whole process promised to be amply entertaining. My smile fled, as though it were slapped on my face, as the girl saw me and threw herself in my general direction. "Please, you must help me," she sobbed as she reached me and clutched at my arm, her filthy hands leaving broad, muddy smears on my clean coat. "Get away from me," I said as I pulled my arm from her grip. I waved down the street with the stem of my pipe. "Carry on. You've no business with me." She clutched at my arm again. "Please, I cannot be caught by the guard. The survival of the city depends on it." I was about to tell her to piss off when the lead guard pointed a gloved hand in our direction. "There she is!" An especially fat man, wearing knots of rank and a ridiculous purple feather on his burnished helmet, staggered around the corner, sweat pouring down his blubbery face. He, too, pointed at us. "An accomplice! Seize them!" I looked incredulously from the guards to the girl. "No!" I cried. "Seize her! I've never seen this wretch in my life." The girl was still looking at me desperately when the quickest guard reached us and grabbed at my arm, dirtying the other sleeve. I slipped from his grip and stepped away. I had no intention of being arrested and brought before the magistrate. While I preferred the term gambler or entrepreneur, Magistrate Ciro tended to use the terms thief and to be hung by the neck until dead. This would not be our first meeting, but would almost certainly be our last. The guard swiped at me again. "Come here, you, in the name of the—" He stopped shouting when I punched him in the chin. He fell down on his armored ass, his silly helmet falling into the gutter. Never one to waste an opportunity, I turned and ran down the narrow street as fast as I could. As soon as I rounded the corner, I ducked into an alley and made several turns, hoping to lose the bumbling guards. When I stopped to catch my breath and check for pursuit, I found the wretched girl close behind me. "What the hell do you want?" I yelled. "Thank you for helping me, sir." "I didn't help you," I snapped. "Now get away from me." I turned and stalked away down the alley, and sure enough, the girl was staggering after me. "Please, sir, I need your help. It's a matter of the utmost importance. We're all in great danger." "You're in great danger of getting my foot in your ass if you don't leave me alone," I growled, but she would not be deterred. "If you don't help me, everyone in this town will be killed." That little phrase stopped me. The everyone also included me, and I had no intention of dying. I turned and faced her. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "Magistrate Ciro was planning on opening the gates to the Turtle tonight, after first bell." The Turtle was a local bandit leader, who drew his name from the turtle shell he seemed compelled to wear on his balding head. In past years he'd been little more than a pest on the coach road, but it was rumored he put together a sizable group of like-minded idiots. If he got inside the walls with any significant force, our bumbling guards wouldn't be able to save us, and the various thieves' guilds and wizards' clans wouldn't be able to stop fighting among themselves long enough to mount any kind of defense. This girl might be right. The Turtle, as ridiculous as he was, could very well burn the place to the ground. "So, how do you know this?" I asked. "Do you have any proof?" She scrabbled at the leather satchel she carried and produced a sealed envelope. My master, Narel, uncovered a plot and planned to reveal it to the mayor's council this evening, but he was arrested by the magistrate's men before he was able. Narel did manage to pen this letter. She held up the envelope with the city's seal on it, and bade me take it to the mayor. I escaped out the window of Narel's chambers and had been running from the guards ever since. I knew the name Narel. He was the mayor's wizard and personal advisor, a man of power and influence. If there was indeed a plot to allow the Turtles' men into the city, the chief wizard would certainly be the one to know of it. "Are you a wizard's apprentice?" I asked, taking in her long, shapeless blue robes, and she nodded in reply. "Then why didn't you just blast those fools that were chasing you and march to the mayor's house?" She shrugged. "I'm merely an initiate. I don't have that kind of power. The most I could done have give them hives." "A fat lot of good all that work and study does if you can't muster enough magic to smite a few idiots." "So," she said, ignoring my jibe, "will you help me? I've no one else." "You'd not be turning to me if I'd not been unlucky enough to walk down that street." I turned from her, rubbed my chin, thinking. On one hand, I could try and get out of the city before the invasion. If I was lucky, I could slip by the Turtles' men and not be seen, or they could catch me and use my guts to wrap their swords. On the other hand, I could help this whelp and see her through to the mayor, stop Magistrate Cyril's little plot, and save the city. It was a little too altruistic for my general nature, but it seemed to carry the higher possibility of survival. Besides, I hated Cyril with a passion, and I would like to see him hung. "All right," I said, turning back to her. "I'll help you get to the mayor's chambers, but then I don't want to see you again. Ever. Understood?" Her grin split her face ear to ear, and I noticed she really was quite pretty beneath all the filth. She stuck out a grubby hand. "My name is Sarah." I looked at the filthy hand and shook it reluctantly. "My friends call me Chris." "All right, Chris," her smile faltered a little. "Do you have any idea how we're going to reach the mayor? Both the guard and the magistrate's constables are everywhere, and they've been ordered to arrest me on sight." I chewed the inside of my lip, thoughtful. "I have an idea," I said, "and I know someone who owes me a favor." Within half a turn of the glass, we managed to evade the town guards, who seemed to be stumbling up and down every alley I tried to sneak through, and were standing outside of a dingy tavern called the Angry Lobster. An odd name, considering the nearest port was a week's travel away. The sign swinging out front had a badly painted figure that looked more like a puddle of melted wax than a lobster, and didn't display any emotion at all, angry or otherwise. Regardless of the odd name and the ugly sign, this was the place we needed to be. Sarah stood close to me, and she might as well have been wearing my coat. She looked over her shoulder constantly, clutching her satchel to her breast as she eyed the collection of cutthroats distributed throughout the pub. It was unlikely she'd ever thought about setting foot in such a place as disreputable as the Angry Lobster, but it was a place with which I was not only familiar, but completely at home. "Stay close to me," I instructed Sarah. "The people here know me well and will not trouble you while you are with me." She looked doubtful and gave an uncertain nod. I did my best to put on a reassuring smile, despite the fact that I found myself wishing I'd never met this girl. I thrust my distaste aside and hitched up my sword belt. There was work to be done and little time to do it. It was nearly the 12th bell, and the gates would be open to the Turtle in a little more than an hour. I puffed out my chest and stepped boldly into the room, hand to my sword hilt to show that I was not a man to be trifled with. The effect was not necessarily as I'd intended. No one even looked up from their cups or card games, and not a soul in the smoky room seemed to take notice of my appearance. At least no one was trifling with me, and stealth was probably what I wanted anyway. "You're well known, all right," Sarah said, a smirk on her face. I gritted my teeth and ignored her. I stalked slowly through the room, seeking a familiar face, and it wasn't long till I found it. At the back of the tavern, near the hearth, speaking in hushed tones with several other rough-looking individuals, was my good friend Hob. As soon as he saw me, Hob dove under his table and tried to scramble towards the door. I jumped over his chair and grabbed him by the lapels, yanking him to his feet so that his weaselly face, complete with foul breath, was close to mine. "Hob," I said in a silky voice that didn't match the tight grip I had in his coat, "aren't you happy to see me?" "Chris," the little weasel said, his eyes casting about the room for some means of escape. "I didn't know it was you. I thought it was someone else. What can I do for you?" I let him go, and his filthy boots clapped back to the floor. "You owe me, Hob," I said as I dusted off my hands, "and I've come to collect." Hob shrugged his narrow shoulders and patted his limp purse. "Sorry, Chris, I haven't got your money. And besides, My friends behind you might have something to say about your collecting." In my haste to grab the little weasel, I'd failed to keep my eye on the men at his table, and 4 of them now stood, flexing their calloused hands. Knowing that they were likely about to stab me with their dirty knives, I whipped my sword from its sheath and slapped the flat of the blade between Hobbs' legs, making him wince. "Tell your friends to sit down," I growled, "or you'll be looking for a new job as a town eunuch. Besides, I'm not looking for coin. I need a favor." Hob waved a yellow-nailed hand at his friends, and they sat down, eyeing me carefully. "What kind of favor?" Hob asked, suspicious. He jerked his chin towards Sarah, who stood cowering behind me. "And who the hell is this?" I smiled at him. "She's not your concern, Hob. And I remember you once telling me you could get into any building in the city." A short time later, I found myself up to my knees in filthy water, following the shadowy shape of Hob, a smoky torch, through a set of tunnels that led under the mayor's mansion. I slowed as Sarah grabbed my coat and leaned close to me. "Why did you tell him we were trying to steal the guard's payroll?" she asked. "Why didn't you tell him what we were really doing?" I snorted at her. If I told him the town could be overrun by the turtle at any moment, and we were on the run from the magistrate, he, and every other cutthroat in this town, would do one of 2 things. Either he'd turn us into the magistrate looking for a reward, or he'd throw open the gates to the turtle's men first, hoping to gain favor along with a large sum of money. Telling them the truth would be a bad idea. Now shut your mouth and come on. I tried to convince Sarah to give me the letter and let me go to the mayor alone, but she didn't trust me to do it. I didn't blame her. I wouldn't trust me either. And it was probably better that the mayor get this little piece of news from Sarah, whom he knew, rather than me and my sword, whom would most likely cause him to piss in his fancy pants and scream for help. In front of us, Hobbs stopped. He looked about, muttering to himself and counting, tapping his thumb to the fingers of his right hand. "Here," he said finally. "This grate will lead to the cellar below the mayor's chambers." I looked up. Set into the angled stone ceiling was a barred grate, about a pace across. On one side there was a heavy lock, thick with rust. "Are you sure?" I asked Hob, and he nodded in reply. "How do you know?" Hob shrugged, lifting his dirty hands. "I worked in the City Works Guild for a short time, and I had a look at the field of plans." "Why'd you stop?" Hob gave me a nasty grin. "Because they caught me using the plans to sneak into the buildings at night." I nodded, expecting nothing less. "You wouldn't happen to have swiped the key for this grate, would you?" I asked, looking doubtfully at the burly lock. Hob shook his head, several lice and unhealthy-looking flakes falling onto his dirty cloak. "No such luck, Chris. I showed you the way in. Using it, it's up to you." I mumbled a few unpleasant things about him under my breath as I drew a set of lockpicks from my sleeve. I set to work on the lock but had no success. The rust was too thick and the tumblers were completely immobile. We would need a thick file or a heavy hammer to make our way now. I hissed in frustration and looked about for something to bash the lock with. "Let me try," Sarah said, stepping close to peer at the lock. I shrugged and held up my picks, but she ignored me and cupped her hands around the lock. She bowed her head in concentration, and sweat popped out on her brow as a faint glow appeared in her hands. The glow grew stronger, until a bright light that was painful to look at, and was accompanied by a searing heat that scorched my face, but it didn't seem to burn Sarah's hands. I threw my arm across my eyes and turned away. Abruptly, the light faded and Sarah stepped away. The lock was still there, and whole, but it was bright white with heat. I pulled a dagger from my belt and cracked the pommel against the lock. It snapped off as though it were made from clay instead of iron. I looked over at Sarah with a new respect. "I thought you wouldn't be able to do more than give someone a rash," I said, grinning. She shrugged. "It's a simple cantrip, really. The same spell I'd use if I was to light a candle, only I focused it a little longer." "It was well done, anyway," I said as I grabbed hold of the grate and tugged. At first it didn't budge, its hinges rusted tight, but when Hob added his weight as well, it opened with a high-pitched squeal. When it was open, I peered inside. The stone was old and pitted, providing easy handholds, and the angle wasn't too steep. Apparently, Lady Luck hadn't completely abandoned me after all. I reached up and pulled myself inside, and grasped Sarah's hand to pull her in. I helped her scrabble past me, then planted my hands firmly on her ample bottom and shoved her upwards. She squawked and glared at me, slightly scandalized. I only grinned at her and waved her up the chute, then looked back down for Hob. "Are you coming?" I asked. Hob smiled his Weasley smile. "I only agreed to get you to the mayor's house. I didn't say anything about actually going in. I think I fulfilled my debt to you. Besides, someone has to cover your escape while you steal the payroll. I returned Hobbs' grin. He was just as likely to stick a knife in me and steal anything I came out with as to watch my back, and we both knew it. Whatever you say, Hob. I turned away and scrambled up the chute, not giving the distasteful little man another thought. Shory had reached the top of the narrow passage and was waiting for me. There was another grate, this one shining and well-oiled, with only a slender pin to keep it closed. A quick slip of my dagger and the pin was free, allowing me to lift the grate and set it down with a soft clink. I stepped up onto the floor in a crouch and found myself in a storage cellar, surrounded by barrels of wine and stacks of food. There were enough provisions in the broad room to feed the town guard for a month, and I thought that must be nice to be a fat, stupid elected official. The only light came from a gas lamp set high on the wall, and there was no one else in the room. I beckoned to Sarah, and she climbed up. "Do you know your way around the mansion?" I asked quietly. She nodded, although her face was doubtful. "I've only been here a couple of times, but I think I can find the mayor's chambers. That's where he'll be at this hour." I nodded in agreement. I never met the mayor personally, but at his public appearances he seemed to be about as lazy and stupid a man as there ever was, and surely he wouldn't be burning the midnight oil. We'd have to rouse him from his comfortable slumber and get his fat ass out of bed to stop the conspiracy that was threatening his town. "All right," I said. "Lead the way." There was a short set of stairs that led from the floor of the cellar to the door, and we crept up it. I opened the door a crack and peered out. There was a guard standing in the hallway, dressed in the orange tunic of the magistrate's constables. He didn't concern me overly, though, as he was leaning on his halberd, head resting against the shaft, snoring softly. I shook my head and wondered at the exceptional laziness that would lead a man to learn how to sleep standing up. After I checked to see that there were no other guards, I slipped out of the door and crept towards the snoring man. When I reached him, I pulled the conical helmet from his head, and he didn't stir. I laughed inwardly as I rapped my knuckles sharply against his protruding forehead. The guard started, stood bolt upright, and looked around in alarm. "I'm sorry, sir. I only closed my eyes for a moment, sir. I swear I wasn't sleeping, sir." His eyes widened further as he saw me standing there, grinning. He was about to call out in alarm when I bashed his helmet into the side of his head. His knees buckled and he sagged to the floor as his helmet gave off a faint ring. I caught his halberd and leaned it against the wall as I looked down at the now dented helmet. "These are good for something after all," I said, and clapped the helmet back onto the guard's head. I turned back to Sarah, who was hiding in the doorway. "Come on, before we're discovered." Sarah came out of the hallway and looked each way. "This way," she said, and hurried to her left. I drew my sword and followed her. We moved down the hallway, past long tapestries and busts of sour-looking old men. A tall clock against the wall gave the time as half past the 12th bell. The gates would be open in half a turn of the glass, and we needed to hurry. We came to an intersection of two hallways. Sarah stopped and rubbed her chin a moment. "I think it's this way." She pointed to the right. "Isn't it?" I looked at her incredulously and shrugged my shoulders. "I haven't the foggiest notion. That's why I'm following you." Sarah set her jaw and nodded to herself, then rounded the right corner, directly into a group of orange-coated constables. Most of them were busy picking their noses, probably thinking about beer, and it took them a moment to notice that we were there. "Hey," the foremost guard said to his companions, his finger hovering just outside his left nostril. "Isn't this them?" The others stopped digging their various orifices long enough to look up and stare at us agape-mouthed. Hoping to avoid being stabbed, I yanked a set of antique armor into the path of the guards before I grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her down one of the branching hallways. "Run!" I roared at her. We sprinted down the hallway, angry shouts and clattering armor following us. We ran past a broad set of doors, and Sarah skidded to a halt. "I think this is it," she said, looking at the doors. "Yes, this is the mayor's bedchamber." The finely carved doors certainly suited the chambers of a mayor, and without hesitation I burst through them, held them open long enough for Sarah to follow, and slammed them shut. I threw the thick bolt and sat, quite conveniently, above the inner brass handle. I sheathed my sword and looked about for something else to stack against the door, but stopped as Sarah tugged at my arm. Chris?" she said. The tone of her voice made me think there was something horrific and terrifying behind me, and I whirled, drawing my sword again. I immediately wished I hadn't turned, because the scene behind me was indeed horrifying. I saw the mayor, in all his sweaty glory, on all fours, with an ox yoke around his neck. Above him stood a robust woman, who was certainly not his wife. She was stuffed into a leather corset, and held a broad wooden paddle, which she seemed to have been recently applying to the mayor's livid red ass. The mayor stood and looked around in panic. How dare you interrupt my, treatment? Yes, you've interrupted my, nurse while she was repairing my back. The fat man pulled the yoke off his neck and snatched a thick robe off a chair near the bed and covered his bulk. I shook my head to try and clear the awful scene I had just witnessed, and began piling overstuffed chairs against the door while the magistrate's guards found us and kicked it down. Your worship, Sarah said, holding up her hands in a placating manner. I bear a message from Norel with the utmost urgency. What? The mayor asked. Norel, you say? What kind of message? Sarah drew the slightly crumpled letter from her satchel and handed it over to the mayor. The fat man broke the wax seal with his thumb and quickly scanned the parchment. By the gods, he whispered. The turtle? In my city? Not while I still breathed. He waddled across the room and pulled on a velvet rope. Far away I heard a bell ring. Sarah, the mayor said, stuffing the letter into the pocket of his robe. You've gotten here just in time. The city owes you and your, friend, he waved a fat hand in my direction, a great debt of thanks. Another door to the chamber burst open, and a hard-looking man, dressed in the uniform of the town guard with a blue plume on his helmet, these guards certainly enjoyed their fucking feathers, stepped into the room, sword in hand. Lord Mayor, are you well? He looked at my naked sword and raised his own, moving to stand between myself and the mayor. I'm fine, Captain, the mayor said, putting his pudgy hand on the guard's arm, but the city is in great danger. Muster the men that you can be sure are loyal to you, and secure the city gates. Seize Magistrate Cero under my authority and arrest his constables. The magistrate intends to betray us to the turtle. The captain's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in fury. I will see to it immediately, your worship. As the captain stepped quickly from the room, the mayor turned back to us. Sarah, thank you again. Now, please excuse me. I have much to see to, including the release of your master. He turned to the leather-clad woman. Karna, we will have to continue my, treatment later. The woman nodded and scurried to the side door. The mayor began to studiously ignore us as he dressed, muttering to himself. I sheathed my sword and looked around the rich chamber, angry that I'd gotten nothing more than a fat hand away for thanks, and unsure what I should be doing. I was eyeing a couple of shiny things on the dressing stand and wondering if I could fit them into my coat, when Sarah cleared her throat loudly. Lord Mayor? The fat man looked up and appeared startled that we were still there. What is it, child? I think it appropriate that my guardian, on this important quest, be given a just reward. I brightened at the suggestion. The mayor looked reluctant, but nodded. Oh, of course. Your companion has shown, great valor. I snorted. If the mayor had known just how reluctant my valor had been, he'd not be so quick with his praise. But I was never one to contradict someone paying me a compliment. He pulled open a drawer in his dressing stand and pulled out a clinking bag, which he tossed to me. I have a place on my staff for an able man. Come see me tomorrow when this fracas is over, and we'll talk of your future. I grinned broadly as I looked at the bag. It contained a score of fat gold coins, more money than I make at the dice table in 3 turns of the moon. Not bad for a day's work. Yes, your worship, I said. Glad to be of service. I was still counting my money when the mayor bustled off, muttering to himself, and Sarah slipped her hand through mine. Any chance you'd buy me something hot to drink with your new wealth? She tipped me a wink, and I noticed, once again, that she really was quite pretty beneath all the filth. My grin widened until I felt my face would split. It was odd how the foulest luck could turn around until you felt that Lady Luck herself was riding in your pocket. The end. I hope you liked that story, my friends, and once again, thanks for being here with me. I always appreciate it.